When starting out, content is king. I started off just using my iPhone and a podcast app to record all my episodes. Be original, have a market plan, understand your listeners. Don't start podcasting thinking you're going to make a lot of money. Yes, you can, but it takes time, strategies, and the right timing, knowing when to go for the monetization. This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes. Welcome back to another episode of the Podcast in the Rough. This is episode 154, and I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas. And this is the podcast where I help you navigate the challenges of podcasting and find your unique voice. In today's episode, I'm going to cover the top reasons people don't start podcasts and how you can overcome them. There are a multitude of reasons why people might hesitate to start a podcast or struggle to stay consistent with one. In this episode, I'm going to break these down and share some practical tips from my own journey to help you push through the initial hurdles. Reason 1, fear of failure. Many potential podcasters are afraid to launch their show simply because they don't want to fail or put out something that no one will listen to. I felt the same way. However, my imagination took over and I began wondering what my podcast and all those episodes could turn into later on down the road as I grew my listener base. If this is one of the reasons you're not starting a podcast, here's my tip. Create a bunch of episodes without releasing them. Do 10 episodes and then listen to them as a series. Don't try to make a lot of edits or perfect these. Let them just be as they are. This way, you leave room for improvement over time as you build your listener base and avoid overwhelming yourself with edits. Starting off this way helps you get your first 10 episodes lined up and scheduled for launch. Here's a statistic you're already overcoming by applying this tip. Most podcasters quit after their first few episodes. Having 10 episodes pre-recorded will give you breathing room to create more in advance without feeling like you have a weekly deadline. So if you decide to produce one episode per week, this gives you a 10-week head start. Another staggering statistic is that less than 20% of podcasts that launch in 1 year make it to the next. Just by starting with 10 episodes ready to go, you'll have the momentum you need to keep the ball rolling. Reason 2, unclear topic or format. Some podcasters might not be sure what topic or niche to choose or what format would be best for them. When starting out, I recommend choosing a topic you know a lot about, something you're interested in, or something with plenty to learn and share. For me, my first topic was sharing my daily life and all the things I was doing as an entrepreneur, growing my businesses, and as a stay-at-home dad. Then it shifted as my career and businesses took off, and I shared the journey I was on. Eventually, I began to share strategies and success secrets to make others very successful in my career. All of these might not have been the ideal SEO ranking topics to help me grow, but I was able to stay consistent, have fun, and build a deeper connection with my listeners because they could relate. By choosing a topic that is near and dear to you, you can avoid yet another statistic of why podcasters might fail: lack of authenticity. Podcasters often imitate what others have done, becoming a copy rather than being original enough. Reason 3, technical issues. Some podcasters feel daunted by the technical aspects of podcasting, such as equipment, software, or getting their podcast on platforms like Apple Podcasts. Don't get caught up in all the gear. All you need is a decent podcast microphone to connect to your computer, and you're good to go. If you have a budget for it, get a mixer that can help you with the quality. I started off just using my iPhone and a podcast app to record all my episodes. When starting out, content is king. Remember, you want to grow over time as you podcast. Let your listeners experience the upgrades and improvements. If you want to dive a little bit deeper into suggested microphones, check out episode 104 where I test out my top microphone picks. Reason 4, unrealistic expectations. Podcasters might have unrealistic expectations about how much money they can make from their show or how big their audience will be. Don't start podcasting thinking you're going to make a lot of money. Yes, you can, but it takes time, strategies, and the right timing, knowing when to go for the monetization. Do it too soon, you fail. Do it too late, you miss the opportunity for true wealth. Your focus should be on building a responsive community. If you can grow that, the money will come to you. Trust me. Reason 5, understanding the time and effort. Podcasting requires a lot of work and time, and starting a podcast isn't a guarantee of instant success. This is simple. It only requires as much time as you make for it. Podcasting can be simple and not take up too much time, or it can be time-consuming, depending on your setup, how good you are at delivering each episode, what framework you use, and your workflow. I talked about a simple framework and workflow in episode 100 if you want to dive a little deeper into that. My advice, don't make your podcast stressful. Don't overcomplicate it. You won't know how much time you need until you do those first 10 episodes. And last but not least, here are some tips for avoiding pitfalls in podcasting. Stay focused and committed. Be original. Have a market plan. Understand your listeners. Be patient and give your podcast time to build momentum. Keep things simple. Embrace imperfect episodes and engage with your audience. So there you have it, the top reasons people don't start podcasts and how you can overcome them. Remember, every successful podcast started where you are now, with doubts and fears. But by taking the first step and staying committed, you can turn your podcasting dreams into a reality. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Podcast in Rough. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need that extra push with their own podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform. Until next time, keep pushing forward in podcasting. Tune in next week. This is the Podcast in the Rough.